Did he overdose? No, it's just too much.
Hey! We're recording the podcast! Shut up! Good morning to you, wherever you are, because it is a morning somewhere for May 23rd, 2024. Didn't nail it. My name is Bertie Burns, sitting right over there. She recalls everything you've done on your computer for a very small fee. Ashley Burns, ahead, Ash, everybody.
The trick is you have to pay me to delete it now.
Okay, first of all, you did the intro twice this last week, and both times I wanted to call you out on this. What do you think the intro to our show that you have now been a member of for 100 years, what do you think it is?
I was nervous, okay? The intro is a big responsibility. I know that it's not. Okay.
Just walk me through it, though. Walk me through in words, like just say
Good morning to you, wherever you are, because it's morning somewhere.
Okay, what's the it's got to
Look,
be?
I don't know. I was nervous. I just,
Listen, you can't
got in my own head.
You can't ad-lib. Not when you're the understudy. You can't really do it. Hey, everybody, it's Thursday, which means it's the last day before the last day of the week. The penultimate day. I feel like everyone learned the definition of the word penultimate about like 5 years ago, and then they just started hammering everybody else with that.
I love the word penultimate.
I think people were saying penultimate when they just meant ultimate.
Were they?
It sounds better than ultimate.
Or like super ultimate. It sounds
Ultra
more impressive.
Ultimate, if you will. So we had a fun last night. The part of the world we live in is very rural. We have ducks. We have chickens. We have a duck house now that floats on a pond. And there's been much discussion about what to do with the duck house because it's treated lumber and we want to paint it, but all the paint that we have says don't paint this in an aquatic environment. So,
which I would classify a pond as, Bernie, an aquatic environment.
We had to look it up, but yeah, it is. I think it's aquatic. So we live in a rural area, but around us, there's a very large industry, which is what I believe outside of our country is called the Scotch whiskey industry. Here it's just called whiskey.
I remember when we first moved here, we went to a restaurant we went to a pub and you asked for the Scotch menu and they were like, you want a menu in what's in Scots, in Scots language? They
were doing what the English would call taking the piss. Here they say taking the mick. I think it's a more polite way of saying that. Clearly, I know that place because we've been back there since then. They get a lot of fucking tourists in there.
So you think now you know that they were just messing with you?
Yeah, they will. Listen, when you're new, there's a little bit of hazing that takes place around here.
Well, and the good news is we'll only be new for 2 generations, 3 generations, and then the great grandchildren might even be considered locals.
Yeah, Evie's grandkids might be considered locals at that point in time if everything's not underwater by that point. Listen, I'm doing my best to stay positive.
Okay.
Donald Glover came out with a new album a couple weeks ago. Billie Eilish had one on Friday.
Lots of new music in the world.
We were talking about the Donald Glover thing, you and I, because we have a morning news program-ish, current events, chit-chat, couple sitting down and talking.
Don't call it news. Don't give us that pressure.
One of the things that we try to avoid is just topics that are a bummer. Just that's it, just a bummer. And guess what? There's so many topics right now that are a fucking bummer constantly, day in and day out. Like when we go to look at like current events, like what's going on, Ash? What are we going to talk about in the podcast here? We make our list of topics. I don't know about you, Ash. I like
a lot of bummers. You have to scroll down really far through any news stuff to get past. And when I say bummer too, I mean like true world-ending bummer. We talk about stuff like AI a lot, and that is a bummer. Just because of the effect that it's going to have on so many people's lives.
Aspects, yes.
Yes. There are bummerific aspects.
I do the opposite of whatever doom scrolling is, where it's just like a lot of people like get in that rut and you're just looking at the horrible stuff and over and over. Every day my routine is the same. I load up the front page of my reliable news sources and I just start scrolling going, nope. But at the same time, we talked about this is bringing it back around to the Donald Glover conversation. Had a really great video a few years ago called This is America. And one of the themes of it is all the people dancing in the foreground where all the terrible stuff is going on in the background. We don't want to be those people either, right?
Right. Like we don't want to, well, it's tricky. It's like you don't want to ignore bad things that are happening. But it's also not like everyone doesn't need to focus all on the bad things to make sure the bad things get attention and neglect good things.
Yeah, we don't, we assume you're reading all that other stuff. We assume you're inundated with it the way that we are as well, right?
Right.
Fair to assume that.
If you want really depressing stuff, you've got loads of sources for it.
Loads of sources for it. Like if you want to read every single day about the presidential election where one candidate is in court every day and the other candidate is arguing with the International Criminal Court. It's like if that's your bag, sorry that we don't talk about that every day. We read that stuff and it shapes the way we look at stuff for sure. We just don't we don't dwell on it because we just feel like we're all immersed in it all the time.
Yes.
All the time.
And it's
all the time.
And we are a morning show.
And we are a morning show. We're a morning show. So a little bit of explanation there.
No matter what time you listen to us, we're a morning show.
Bringing around back to happy stuff with a couple cool things have developed here as the seasonality here in our home in Scotland. Another tangent straight away. When I say Scotland, we live in a country, right? Like what is the United Kingdom? It is a
collection of countries and also a country.
But in the Olympics, everyone, this is important why I'm bringing this up. In the Olympics, all the medals go to the UK. It's not England. It's not Northern Ireland.
Right. Like Scotland does not participate as a separate country in things like the Olympics, but they do in some things like
football.
Like
they'll play against Germany, for instance, which is a big deal right now. Do you know anything about that?
Nope. What's happening? What's happening with that?
I think I just kind of explained it. I can go back over it again.
They're playing Germany? Got it. Okay.
So this all comes back around to you. The Olympics are going on. Like this is 2024. There's Summer Olympics.
Not like right this second, but they're coming.
2 months away. July, I think I looked up, July 26th is the start date. So pretty close to it. We're about 2 months out from an Olympics. When I was a kid, when you were a year out from the Olympics, you were talking about the Olympics. And I feel like it's just not what it used to be.
I would agree with that. And maybe it's just because there's so much more going on now that there are other things to talk about as aside from a year lead up to the Olympics. The Olympics do seem very popular when they're happening.
Do they?
I think so. People are always talking about the various events and sharing, the event highlights and stuff on social media, and people will go and watch. Well, this is the Summer Olympics, so I assume it's not ice skating, but the fast run times and all that stuff, like any records, those all get shared around, and people are excited about those things while it's happening. But I don't feel like there's nearly the ramp up there used to be.
Let me just throw this at you, and you can just pass if you want to. Name a current Olympic athlete for any country.
Pass. Immediate pass.
Like Michael Phelps, going all the way back, Mary Lou Retton, like maybe I'm just because my memory, but I knew about them going up. Like Dan and Dan, remember the decathletes that Reebok was focusing on while they were qualifying for the Olympics? And one of them didn't even qualify. It was like this, it was a huge fucking faceplant. Do you remember that whole campaign?
No, I don't remember that at all.
It was years ago, decades ago. And you're a little bit biased because you grew up in a town that hosted the Olympics. Yeah,
so I was in Utah, and it was the 2002 Winter Olympics, and my dad volunteered.
That's the worst Olympics if you're keeping score at home.
How dare you?
You know what we need?
How dare you?
How come there's no Autumn Olympics? What would that be? Like Starbucks.
Harvesting. That would be the events where they're like rolling cheese down the hill. Who's got the best time at the cheese rolling? It's
two dudes standing around. One guy goes, "It's kind of cold." The other guy goes, "You think this is cold?"
As they're waiting outside while their wives are inside getting pumpkin spice.
The guy who can wear his shorts the longest is the winner of that event.
The Canadians win every year.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have Winter Olympics and Summer Olympics. We don't just have like horrible weather Olympics and then nice weather Olympics.
Well, I mean,
which is really what it is.
It makes sense to have the swimming in the warm weather and the running in the warm weather and the ice skating in the cold weather and the what's the toboggan one?
Tobogganing? Being the bobsled?
The bobsledding. It makes sense to have that in the winter on account of all the ice.
Could we start a Scottish team, kind of like in the spirit of the Jamaican bobsledding team? Is there something that no one from Scotland would ever do in the Olympics? We should look at that.
Yes, I'll bet we can do that. You know what?
Honestly,
we should do?
I think swimming would be up there. To be honest with you, who the hell's swimming up here?
Are you kidding? I see videos of guys just going out swimming in a loch while there's while there's ice flow.
Wow.
It's ridiculous.
Actually, the way you said lock was really impressive. Where did that come from? Are you getting a Scottish accent?
I wish.
Or
I
or
love
were you
Scottish
just
accent.
clearing your throat? It can be hard to say.
No, but I think that we should actually lobby for a new Olympic event on behalf of Scotland, and that's the tree throwing that we see at the Highland Games.
Also known as the caber toss. We went to the Highland Games just recently.
Yeah.
Actually, you're leading us all back around. I love it. So in the area where we live, it's very rural, but there's this big industry with the whiskey industry around, which has some really big, very, very famous, world famous, one would say, distilleries, which are big companies. Oddly enough, these are huge operations that don't employ a whole hell of a lot of people. Like some of the biggest whiskey distilleries that produce millions of liters of whiskey a year, the operation of making the whiskey is probably less than 20 people.
Yeah, or definitely in that range. Here's the thing about the whiskey.
The tour guides and all the other stuff around it is a whole different thing,
Sure.
and the people in like the restaurants and stuff like that.
But the thing about the whiskey industry is that it's mostly warehousing. Because the whiskey has to age for so long that they can make whiskey in a couple of days, but to actually be whiskey, it has to sit for I think the legal minimum is 3 years.
To be
But
considered Scotch whiskey.
yeah, but almost no one
It
does
feels
that.
weird to say Scotch whiskey now because I usually just say whiskey, and when I refer to American whiskey, you can't emphasize the E. At the end of it,
Right.
Everyone here just says bourbon, and when they say bourbon, that just
They
means
just mean American whiskey.
American whiskey, yeah, exactly. It's just like in America, people say Scotch, when they mean whiskey from Scotland.
They do.
And that's it. But even I think even you'll see places here that say Scotch whiskey. But you're right. It's the window for actually making the spirit itself is about 2 to 5 days max, because there's a fermentation step in there where some people go 120 hours and some people go 30 hours, and that's it. And then after they're done with that, like the 4 days, then it goes into a cask and it goes in a warehouse for 12 years. Like yesterday we went to the Macallan, which is world famous distillery. And it's almost like a casino. Like that's the best thing I could equate it to other people who aren't in this area, because it's like, there's not much around it, but it's like this huge, incredibly ostentatious hub, like right here. And they have huge events. Like they had Cirque du Soleil. And that's what we went and did there last night. We went to the Cirque du Soleil performance.
Which was unlike any Cirque du Soleil performance I've ever seen. It was really cool. If you're picturing something like the Las Vegas installations, it's not that.
Also, we should translate. If you're not familiar, Cirque du Soleil is French. It means Circus of the Soleil. We actually, did Olga ever come on this podcast? She was on my vlog.
No, I don't believe she has.
I think she came to visit us
not
before.
Yet. It
yeah.
was before. Yeah, she visited us, but it was before we were doing this podcast.
One of my favorite stories of all time. Olga K, who's like an OG YouTuber. We've known her for years. We actually went to the last ever, for my vlog, the last ever Ringling Brothers performance
With
ever.
her, yeah.
It was like, what is that, 122 years or something it was?
It was a long time.
We went to the last one. It was like some weird ass suburb of New York City that we had to go to it. But her whole story was she grew up in Soviet era Ukraine. And I mean, she grew up where she would talk about like churning her own butter. She had electricity in a certain window during the times of the day and things like that. She was assigned a job. Her parents were assigned jobs. Like she grew up in the Soviet Union, And then she made her way over to the U.S. by joining the Ringling Brothers branch that was trying to compete with Cirque du Soleil, which is more of a boutique acrobatic-based circus. There's no animals or anything like that. It's all human performers. It's really impressive. Very artistic. I think you were saying like it's as close as you can get to like interpretive dance.
Yes, I described this particular Cirque installation as like the interpretive dance of circuses.
Look at you, Cirque. You're on a first-name basis.
We are. We go way back. But it was, it's really cool because it's one of the things I like about Cirque du Soleil is it's very much about pushing humans to their limits. Like what can humans do?
Yes.
And those things, like at their peak, are so physically impressive.
And it's also, you have to realize too, it's kind of like we were talking about the Olympics. If you decide you're going to be a gymnast, there's a point at which genetically whether or not you're going to be a gymnast,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
It's like
sure.
you can get started when you're 5 years old and get going, and then you're like, well, now you're 5'7", so it's kind of over for you. You know, for what you're trying to do. It's just some people, it's just like the Olympics just to me has turned into almost like a genetics showcase at this point, you know? And I felt like the same thing watching Cirque du Soleil yesterday because we watched what is sitting down today. What is the one that you've held on to? Like, what is the most captivating one you recall from last night?
It's going to sound really weird, but it was the hair girl.
Oh, right. The hair girl, right.
The most captivating to me was definitely hair girl, but I think the one that you have in your mind right now is probably the contortionist.
You remember when we showed the robot that like stood up from the ground, but it stood up not by, you know, putting its arms down and lifting itself up. It just planted its feet and rolled up from its pelvis.
Yeah, in ways that aren't supposed to happen in a body.
We saw that person that's based on yesterday. Yeah.
It turns out that was mocap. Yeah, it was. I find contortion really interesting because you're right. That's a genetic thing. I think for the heights of the art of contortion, you can't just do stretches every day and get to that.
You don't think the hair lady who performed at Mr. Soleil, I'm going to show her perspectives on a first name basis. At the performance last night, you don't think the hair lady had a genetic advantage? I mean, we were trying to figure it out. How would you describe this? What's the easiest way to describe it?
It's this lady she basically had, her hair was in like done up in like a bun that had a ring through it. And they basically hooked the ring to like a fly wire.
Right.
And girl was flying through the air by her hair.
Like imagine you had a harness and you're doing wire work, but there's no harness. They just tie your hair.
You're just hanging basically by your head. But via your hair. So it's not something I've ever seen done before. And it was really cool, really captivating. I was sitting here going, man, the breakage must be devastating. Like I can't do that. Genetically speaking, I would have no hair left.
Yeah. And you would watch some of these performers and make it look effortless, but you're watching them, even like the guy who did like the yo-yos, like what do we call that? Like a whirling dervish? What is that thing?
Yeah, it was
it's like a yo-yo that's not connected to the string.
Yeah, it's like these very big yo-yos. They were not connected, so they could like flip off the string, then it would catch them. And then he got up to doing like 3 or 4 of them and just whirling them around, like juggling these yo-yos. And I was thinking to myself, that guy, like when he was in like 2nd grade, right? He got someone gave him a yo-yo. He learned to walk the dog, and that was it. That he was on his life's path,
and that was it. Like he just did it every single day for the rest of his life. I just saw a YouTube video where it was I want to say a 2-year-old that they gave a guitar to, and they recorded his progress from 2 to 12, like 10 years of guitar progress. And his family is obviously very musical. It was really impressive to watch just what time does. You know, there's that myth about 10,000 hours and you become an expert. I can tell you from my experience playing Apex Legends, that's not true. It's just not true at all. Video games in general. But yeah, it's really interesting when someone commits themselves to something and just does it right. I was talking about, or I was thinking about the other day, Luke McKay, the guy who used to draw the Rashid comics, who now draws for Wizards of the Coast. He does all the Wizards of the Coast illustrations, some of their publications
and
as well.
I think he's done some cards.
Has he done cards as well?
I believe so.
Yeah, and also gave me COVID. You'll never forget who gave you COVID. But when we were working together really early on, he's a tremendous artist, enormously popular online. And I got to talking to him. It's like how envious I am of, 2 groups of people. I'm envious of people who can sing because fuck you. I'm also envious of people who can draw. It's just like it's amazing talent to me. And it's something you're born with. And I was just like, I'm just so envious you have this like innate talent you can draw. And Luke, he's like, in his very laid back manner, he goes, no. And I said, no, you're very good at this. And he goes, no, I'm not. I just decided one day I wanted to draw. And I said, what? And he goes, yeah, one day I just woke up and thought I'll just draw every day until I'm good at it. And that's what he did. Like in his 20s, he did that.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, he wasn't like drawing from like 9 years old and stuff like that. He just one day kind of had the same opinion I had. I was like, this is something I envy. But instead of sitting around and bitching about it, he sat down and gave himself a task and drew every single day until he was good and was a professional artist. And he was a nurse before that.
So, Bernie, are you telling me that you're about to run away and become a whirling dervish expert?
I'm going to hook my hair up to the top of the ceiling and be whirling around here. It was really wild. Like she would like slide across the floor. Like some of that stuff was the most impressive. I know people were cheering when she went up like 30 feet in the air and then
spinning like a top.
Spinning. How many? I mean, the revolutions were so fast. I think the frame rate of my eye couldn't keep up with it. It was so wild. It was so wild.
I'm trying to think of things that I've actually like stuck with to get good enough at. There's a lot of things that I envy, but not a lot of things that I put the work into to actually be good at. Not since people stopped paying me to be good at video games.
I can give you one that you're great at.
What's that?
Editing. Video editing.
Really? Thank you.
Had you ever video edited before you started working on the No?
Yes. Do you know what my first video editing project ever was?
Ever. Can I guess the Flock videos we did?
It was Flock.
Yeah.
It was Flock. So you and I, we sat down to get you a stupid achievement, which now, by the way, I'm going to take my revenge. We'll talk about that another time. So we sat down to play Flock, and you wanted to make these videos, so we recorded it, and then you edited, I think, the first two. I think
I was showing you how to use the editing program.
You were showing me how, and then you had me do some of the editing, and especially as we got further into the game, and it was more and more elaborate with more and more attempts to get through these levels.
Some of them were like 60, 70, 80 attempts.
Oh yeah, I think if I recall correctly, one of them, the attempts went up into like the 40s. But, and just trying to edit all that together, that was my first ever video editing.
Ever, right. And then you got great at it. So that's a good example of one. You're great at video editing.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you.
In fact, you should edit this podcast.
Speaking of which, though, I do have some people to thank for this podcast. That would be Hunter Clark and Brett Little, our sponsors for today. Thank you both for sponsoring this episode of Morning Somewhere.
I met my first Hunter when I was in 6th grade. I'd never heard of anyone named Hunter before.
I love the name Hunter.
Do you?
It's just a cool name.
What do you think is the most common, or I shouldn't say common, what do you think is the most popular names in the U.S. right now this year?
Thor.
Liam and Olivia.
Really?
Yeah.
You know what? I love the name Olivia.
It's been popular for a long time now, though.
And I like the name Liam too. Let's not leave the Liams out. But I love the name Olivia.
Oh, well, the reason why I'm named Bernie is because everyone was named Michael. I guess there was a lot of biblical names when I was born.
I was in a class of 4 Ashleys once.
No shit. Were you really?
Yeah. Ashley was a very common name.
And then there was like the whole like Braden Jaden period, that was in like the early 2000s. And then Jackson was a big one for a while too. It's weird, isn't it weird how names go in like these big long cycles?
Yeah, well, right. Like I can't believe that that people have stopped naming their kid Khaleesi.
Should name him Drogon. Buck the trend. Yeah, we were just talking about that. I just read another article about how like something about the finale for Game of Thrones was 5 years ago now.
It's shocking how long ago it was.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, but then how quickly it just like fell off the zeitgeist. While we're talking about that, before we leave, I did want to talk about this. X-Men 97, now, according to comicbookmovies.com, let me make sure I got the right website here.
This is comicbookmovie.com.
Comicbookmovie.com, thank you very much. They have an article saying now that X-Men 97 is the single highest rated MCU project of all time on Rotten Tomatoes, with 100%. And how many people watched the finale? Was it 3.5 million?
3.5 million views.
On Disney Plus. And it's been incredible. And then I read further into the article, and
I wonder how many watch minutes that is.
Stop it. It took the throne. It took the throne from, what would you guess? Have you looked in the article
let's
yet?
see, maybe WandaVision? That was a good one. That was honestly a benchmark setter for me.
Would you be shocked if I said Ms. Marvel?
What?
Ms. Marvel. Yeah. That previously at 98% was the highest rated.
I mean, look, don't get me wrong. You didn't watch Ms. Marvel prior to The Marvels. I did. I watched it. I enjoyed it a great deal. I thought it was a really cute show. That actress was a fantastic find. She brings so much charm to that character. It's absolutely wonderful. I liked it, but really the highest rated MCU project.
Here's what I think that says. I think when you see these stats and records and all that stuff, it's not weighted by the sample size either.
Okay. I was going to say, because fucking wait till the next season of Daredevil comes out. It's coming for you.
What's in the next Daredevil?
I don't know. Daredevil Born Again. It's got the Netflix cast back. I'm just crossing my fingers. I loved everything they did.
Got She-Hulk? Because Daredevil was in the She-Hulk
I know,
series.
yeah, he was. And you know what? I liked his appearance in that. I thought he was that actor is great. The entire supporting cast for Daredevil is great. They're all back. They ditched whatever they were doing and went back to the Daredevil original formula, apparently. So fingers crossed.
All right. Well, we have to watch X-Men 97. That's what I'm learning. That was a little bit past my time. I was a little bit too old when the X-Men series was out there, the animated series.
And I didn't have television.
You did not have television? What does that mean?
I didn't have live television until I was out of high school.
What is that? Wait a second. I was about to wrap this podcast up. Wait a second. You didn't have television?
When I stayed at my dad's house, we could sometimes watch like Nick at Night, when they had like Green Acres and I Dream of Jeannie on and that kind of thing. But no, where I lived primarily, we didn't have live television. I didn't have reception and we couldn't afford a satellite dish.
I didn't know this. So you didn't have television in your house? So when you talk about
I watched the VHS of Cats a lot.
Of what? Cats the musical?
Yeah.
The Broadway version?
Yes. The taping they put out.
How is this all coming out now?
It explains a lot, doesn't it?
Is that why you were like, you really vibing during Cirque du Soleil last
I guess
night?
so. I'm like, yeah. When the cheeky fox was out, he was such a rumple teaser.
You're blowing my mind here. Anyway, I gotta figure all this stuff out later. All right. But we have to wrap this up. Thank you very much for listening today. We will be back to talk to you tomorrow, and we hope you all will be here as well.
Bye, everybody.
See you, suckers!
Hey!